Chief Justice Roxanne George will rule Wednesday in the case filed by private citizen Reeaz Hollander, backed by attorneys from the opposition PPP, that the Region 4 returning officer breached the country's electoral law when he Thursday last declared the unverified vote count for the largest voting district, 4. She will give her ruling Wednesday. The process of verification is referred to in the law as counting of the votes polled, and is provided for by Section 84(1) of the Representation of the People Act, Chapter 103. Region 4 had 897 polling stations, but the returning officer only allowed others to be present for the tabulation of 421 statements of poll and aborted the process after. He then certified the votes counted and handed it to the country's chief elections officer, who went ahead and prepared a final report of all 10 electoral districts for the Guyana Elections Commission GECOM to declare a winner. 6 affidavits were presented in the case, namely from John Adams and Aubrey Norton, candidates for APNU plus AFC, the returning officer Claremont Mingo, the Deputy Chief Elections Officer Roxanne Myers, and attorneys at law James Bond and Nicola Trotman. Senior Counsel Neil Boston, the attorney for the Chief Elections Officer, and the returning officer, Mr. Claremont Mingo, argued that Mr. Mingo had complied substantially with what the law says.
Substantial compliance will make it not invalid. And the substantial compliance, the Chief Justice seemed to mischaracterize in this thing. Substantial compliance does not have to do with the number of ballot boxes or the number of statement of poll that left to have been checked. It has to do with conduct, and that is what Mr. Mingo did. You may have 558 ballot boxes to come, and they might only be able to bring 20% of the votes. They might only be able to bring 20% of the votes. And those that went before, because of the area that they came from, could have given you but 70% of the votes. And you're going to say, that may not. How can she measure? It is only the issue of conduct has to do with substantial compliance rather than the issue of ballot boxes or statement of polls still to be come.
According to Senior Counsel Douglas Mendes, the attorney representing the applicant, the affidavit of the Deputy Chief Elections Officer Roxanne Myers and others all agreed that the process described in law was suspended sometime on the evening of Wednesday, March 4th, and it was to resume the following day, contradicting what Mr. Mingo stated in his evidence to the court. Mr. Mendes added that neither of the witnesses disputed that only 421 of the statements of poll had been verified or ascertained in the presence of party agents, and that the other statements of poll were not examined in the same way. Mr. Anil Nandlal, one of the attorneys for the applicant, spoke with reporters afterwards.
And Mingo corroborated what we said, that he didn't complete the exercise. Mingo introduced a staff member as informing him that the exercise was completed. This staff member, as we were able to establish to the court, was not an authorized staff member, first thing, to be conducting the exercise. But secondly, we had case law authorities to show that the returning officer is the one who is tasked with the responsibility by Parliament, and only him personally can discharge it. And though he said he discharged it through his agency, his agents, he admitted implicitly that he didn't discharge it. He didn't complete it himself. And the affidavit of Bond and, who was the other one? Bond and Myers and Nicola Trotman, both accepted and admitted in their affidavit, either intentionally or unintentionally, that the process was not completed. That forced Boston to argue the issue of substantial non-compliance, and his arguments were disastrous, honestly.
The attorney for the applicant argued that if the legal process is not followed, it could lead to mistrust, suspicion, and lack of confidence in results declared, and so there should be no reason why the court should not order to set aside the declaration of the returning officer and start the process all over again. The Chief Justice said that there doesn't seem to have been any uniform methodology in all regions as to how 84-1 was to be applied or how the vote count should be verified. When the vote count for 9 regions had been verified and declared, the opposition PPP had won 6 of the 9 regions and was 52,000 votes ahead. But with the unverified report of Region 4, the APNU plus AFC coalition was put in the lead and on course to win the elections. The PPP said the figures were doctored. Meanwhile, as this story continues to develop, CARICOM Chairman and Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, will be leading a delegation of regional leaders to Guyana on Wednesday. Mottley made the announcement Tuesday afternoon during a national address from the Hilton, Barbados. We will, of course, follow the visit and bring you details as we get them.